on this summery fall day. And I am pleased that we have several designations this afternoon, along with some permit applications to deal with. So without further ado, I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll go to disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any pecuniary interests? Seeing none, thank you. We'll proceed to the discussion items. And again, I'm going to remind you to speak into the mic when you are presenting, telling us something, because the acoustics are not as great as we would hope them to be. And I myself have a little bit of difficulty hearing sometimes. So our number 4.1, Heritage Permit Application, HPA 2023 IV 2307 Queen Street South, replacement of a portion of the roof, DSD 2023-414. And the delegation, the applicant is not here this afternoon, cannot be participating. But before we go ahead, Victoria Gruen, our heritage planner, will provide a brief presentation, an overview of the property, of what's involved on this permit application. So, Victoria, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Development Services Department is in receipt of a heritage permit application for 307 Queen Street South. The property is located on the northeast corner of Queen Street South and Cortland Avenue East and contains 3 different buildings constructed during different times. One building from 1879, one from 1893, and the other from 1919, which make up the Bread and Roses Cooperative. The image of the Queen Street South facade on the right hand of the screen shows the 1879 and 1893 portions of the building. This application is before the Heritage Kitchener Committee because the property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and the roof lines of the building are identified as heritage attributes. The proposal outlined in the heritage permit application is to replace approximately 670 square feet of the existing metal roof of the 1893 portion of the building. An image of the existing roof is shown on the screen. The existing roof is proposed to be replaced with a 2-ply modified bitumen roof membrane system. This roof system is a modern cold-applied peel and stick and is used on flat or low-slope roofs. The existing roof currently leaks, and this proposed modified roofing system will provide a flexible waterproof membrane. The proposed roof will be integrated with the existing adjacent roofs and will be gray in color. The existing metal roof is not original to the building and is not visible from Queen Street South. The roof will be partially visible from the inner courtyard of the building. The proposed roof will not impact the roof line of the building, and there will be no adverse impacts to the cultural heritage value or interest of the subject property. Based on these conclusions, Heritage Planning staff recommend approval of the heritage permit application to replace the existing roof. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Seeing no delegation, then questions for staff. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just wondered, and maybe this was in the report, and for that I apologize, but what was the original roof? Like you're saying, this metal roof was not the original one. What was the original roof?
It's unknown what the original roof would be, but based on the age of the building, it's unlikely that the existing metal roof would have been what was originally constructed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, then, we will go to the recommendation. And if this is unanimously approved, it can be processed with delegated approval authority. So the recommendation is that pursuant to Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HBA 2023 IV 020, as outlined in Development Services Department Report DSD 2023-414, be approved to permit the replacement of a portion of the roof on the property municipally addressed as 307 Queen Street South. Who will move the recommendation? Ilona, thank you. All those in favor? It is carried unanimously, so straight to delegated authority. 4.2, we are now looking at a heritage permit application, HPA 2023 V-021, 107 David Street, alterations of the existing rear addition and replacement or alteration of windows, DSD 2023-418. And Jessica Vera, our heritage planner, will make a brief presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the heritage permit application for 107 David Street is for a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located within the Victoria Park Area Heritage Conservation District. At present, the dwelling operates as a duplex, and the proposed work will facilitate the conversion back into a single-family home that can sufficiently accommodate the owner's family. So the applicant is proposing alterations to the rear of the structure. This will include changes to the windows and cladding on the rear addition, as well as changes to the first and second story windows and doors on the original structure. The existing window and door openings on the rear will be increased to accommodate new multi-pane aluminum windows and sliding doors. Some of the existing stucco on the rear addition is proposed to be replaced with black aluminum siding, as this will create a cohesive and seamless design with the new windows. The extent of the work may also include replacing the existing wood windows around the entirety of the building with custom wood replicas if they're determined to be in poor condition. So in reviewing this application, it should be noted that the addition is not original to the property, nor was it built close to the original construction period. Further, the proposed changes will have limited visual impact, as they're not going to be visible from David Street, and they'll have limited visibility from the adjacent pedestrian walkway. The view of the rear is currently screened by existing vegetation, and further visual barriers are a condition of approval. Finally, the new features proposed are distinguishable from, but complementary and compatible with the existing elements per the guidelines and policies of the Victoria Park Area Heritage Conservation District. As such, there's no anticipated impact to the heritage character or value of the subject property, the David Street streetscape, or the Heritage Conservation District as a whole. So staff is recommending approval of this application, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. I don't see any applicant here to make a presentation. So questions to staff? Ilona?
Yes, how visible is it, is the back of the house from the public walkway, and does that have an impact from the Heritage District Plan perspective? Is it only the front of the house that matters, or does the public walkway also have an impact on that?
So the front of the house is the principal facade, and it is where the greatest concern lies. Visibility of the rear, you can see in the picture above, it is limited. There's existing vegetation, including large trees that are present, and they screen a good portion of the side and the rear of the home. And further additional visual barriers, in other words, a fence or a hedge, the applicant hasn't yet decided which they would prefer, is also proposed to be implemented, so that more screening is going to be offered as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Peter.
Just a quick question. The elevation of the new addition facing the property to its side has a substantial amount of glazing, and I was just wondering whether that the staff reviewed the limiting distance requirements with the application for this, for these openings?
I believe that's outside the scope of the heritage concerns. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I believe that's outside the scope of heritage concerns.
Okay.
Sorry, and just to confirm, that review was done in the City of Kitchener by our municipal building officials as part of the review of the building permit application. So not part of the heritage permit application, but we do review it as part of the building permit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, then I will read the recommendation that pursuant to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023 V-021, outlined in Development Services Department Report DSD 2023-418, requesting permission for alterations to the fenestration and cladding of an existing rear addition, alterations to the openings of some rear and rear side window openings, and the replacement of windows where necessary with like units. On the property municipally addressed as 107 David Street be approved in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with the application and subject to the following conditions. A, that the existing vegetation in the rear yard be maintained if feasible and additional screening measures be identified for implementation along the southwestern property line to the satisfaction of the heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. That samples of proposed materials be submitted to heritage planning staff for review prior to the issuance of a building permit. C, that a complete list and documentation identifying damaged windows to be replaced be provided to the heritage planning staff for review prior to the issuance of a building permit, and that final building permit drawings be reviewed and heritage clearance provided by heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. Who will move that, please? Councillor Chapman, thank you. All those in favor? Carried, so it goes to delegated authority. Next item, 4.3, and this one is a notice of intention to designate 87 Scott Street and 82 Weber Street East under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-416. And Jessica Vera will make a presentation, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the property municipally addressed as 79 to 87 Scott Street and 66 to 82 Weber Street East was subject to a site plan application in 2018, which resulted in a heritage impact assessment that received approval in 2020. The heritage impact assessment was requested as this property was listed on our municipal heritage register. And the HIA concluded that two structures on the property, addressed as 87 Scott Street and 82 Weber Street East, met the criteria for designation. So the design value of 87 Scott Street lies in the fact that it's a representative example of the Italianate architectural structure. It's recently undergone rehabilitation to repair or restore original and character-defining elements of the home. The contextual value of the property lies in the fact that it contributes to the continuity and character of the Scott Street streetscape. And further, it's a mirror building to the adjacent 91 Scott Street, and this helps to create a distinctive and balanced frame to the entrance of Pearl Place. So the design value of 82 Weber Street East lies in the fact that it's an excellent example of modern or modernist architecture within the Waterloo region.
And it includes notable features such as a cast-in-place concrete, which are used to create a textured surface representative of natural materials, as well as the circular disc decorative motifs that line the building. Further, 82 Weber Street East has historical value as it was designed by Horton and Ball Architects, which was a local firm responsible for notable buildings in the area, including the Waterloo Public Library as well as the Stanley Park Mall. And it contributes to an understanding of the modernist movement in southwestern Ontario as it yields information on the transition in architectural styles that occurred after the Cold War. Designation was a condition of approval for the site plan, so we do have the owner's support. And that concludes my presentation on this.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And if I may, the 87 Scott Street was one of the ones which won an award, recognized by Mike and Pat Wagner Award, correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So it's good to see these come forward as for recognition as intention to designate. And I would ask, I see no members here to make a presentation, applicants. So are there any questions for staff from committee? Yes, Alona.
So what are the plans for the property? I know that there's already a development on the property in one of the corners. Is there anything else planned for the property itself?
No, I do not believe I don't believe so. So a building which was the subject or the primary subject of the application has been constructed and is now, I think it's 60% occupied, and the restoration has been done to the two heritage buildings as well. So I don't believe there's any further work intended.
They're just going to remain in place? There's no other plans for them at this time?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yes, Peter.
Not a question, but a comment. I'm just delighted to see 82 Weber Street East, being designated. It's a beautiful little building done by Tony Horton, one of the most, what I think one of the best architects that ever worked in town. It's a delightful little building, and I'm just really happy to see it achieve designation. It's great.
Thank you. And it's quite a contrast from, shall we say, Victorian to brutalist, but I don't know if you say it's brutalist.
It is brutalist. Yep.
That's right. All right. We have quite a few of those in that age, and area. All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, then, we'll move to the recommendation for intention to designate. That pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 79-87 Scott Street, /66-82 Weber Street East, as being of cultural heritage value or interest. So, are there any further questions? Who would move this? Peter will move it. So, all in favor? Carried, and this designation proposal, intention, will go to council on October 16, 2023. Next item, 4.4, is another notice of intention to designate, which is 120 Victoria Street South under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-410. Victoria Gruen, our planner, will present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the subject property, 120 Victoria Street South, is located on the north side of Victoria Street South and contains a 3-story brick building constructed around 1907. The building on this property has often been referred to as the Huck Glove Building. In 2010, City Council opted not to list the property on the city's municipal heritage register, given the previous owner was not in support. The Planning Division received applications in 2017 to incorporate the brick building into a 6-story office building. As part of a larger overall development, which included the former Huck Glove Building, the zoning bylaw amendment application applied for requested additional building height on the 25-story tower proposed behind the existing building through the city's bonusing provisions. For heritage bonusing to be given, conservation of a building through designation and a heritage easement and covenant agreement is required. A preservation and maintenance agreement was registered on title of this property in 2019. Heritage planning staff is now proceeding with the process to designate the property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act to close the loop on the bonusing provisions. A heritage impact assessment was submitted as part of the planning applications. The HIA prepared by McCallum Sather concludes that the property municipally addressed as 120 Victoria Street South meets the criteria for designation. Staff's evaluation of the designation criteria determined that 4 out of the 9 criteria are met. So the former Huck Glove Building, now referred to as Glove Box, has design physical value because it is a representative example of the industrial vernacular architectural style and is in good condition. In addition to the exterior features, the interior of the building is also fashioned in the industrial vernacular style with post and beam construction and wood floors and ceilings. The historical associative value of the property relates to the former industries that operated out of this building, including the Hagen Shirt and Collar Co., Lang Shirt Co. Limited, and most recently the Huck Glove Co. Limited. These companies contribute to an understanding of Kitchener's industrial history. The contextual value of the property relates to the contribution of this building to the larger warehouse district cultural heritage landscape as identified in the city's 2014 CHL study. The building's close proximity to residential areas where factory workers typically lived, and the building's prominent setting on Victoria Street South. The image on this slide shows the Glove Box building incorporated into the 6-story office building and the 25-story tower behind. While the subject property is already protected through a preservation and maintenance easement agreement, the designation of this property will add another layer of heritage protection through the heritage permitting process, and the designation will also allow the property owner to access funding through the city's heritage grant program for alterations and repairs. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Now, are there any questions of staff? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
It's actually a comment, not a question. I'm just very pleased to see this is being designated, and I commend the owners of the building for doing it, given the history of resistance prior to this. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I realize it's been a long time in the process of getting this building designated, and it is a very valuable one on Victoria Street. Any other questions? Yes, Ilona.
Are the posts and beams visible still if you go inside the building? Is that part of the heritage designation?
So the interior of the building has not been included as part of the heritage attributes identified in the designating bylaw, but I believe the post and beams are still visible within the building when you walk inside. Okay, so they did preserve them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation. That pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 120 Victoria Street South as being of cultural heritage value or interest, as outlined in Development Services Department Report, DSD 2023-410. And who would like to move this? Councillor Chapman. All right. All those in favor? Carried, and so it is now going to council October 16th. Thank you. We have another interesting proposal for intention to designate, and that is 28 Burgetts Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-412. And Victoria Gruen will present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the subject property, 28 Burgetts Avenue, is located on the north side of Burgetts Avenue in the Centerville Chicopee community. The subject lands are not listed on the city's municipal heritage register, and it was not until 2018 that it was discovered that the property contains an early 19th century log house. The log house was covered by several modifications and additions, and the previous owner discovered the log house when they were preparing plans to demolish the entire dwelling and redevelop the lands. Upon discovery of the log house, a heritage impact assessment and conservation plan, both completed by MHBC Planning, were prepared, and the development proposal was changed to retain the log house in situ. The HIA was submitted in support of a Committee of Adjustment application to sever the lands containing the log house and retain the balance of the lands for future development. The HIA concluded that the property meets 3 of the 9 criteria outlined in Regulation 906 and therefore merits designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The designation of this property was made a condition of the approval of the severance applications. The design physical value relates to the building being a rare, representative, and early example of 19th century log construction in Waterloo County. The original log house was constructed using hand-hewn squared logs on top of each other horizontally with mortar and horsehair chinking. The images at the top of the screen show the logs and mortar and horsehair chinking, and the bottom image shows what the log house looks like today. The historical associative value relates to the Burgetts family having held ownership of the lands for 119 years. While the Burgetts family is not identified in historic records as being significant to the development of the local community, the family did hold the land for a considerable time. The log house on this property aids in an understanding of the early history of the community and the theme of early agricultural settlement. The property has lost the majority of its contextual value. While the log house remains on its original location on the subject lands, it no longer is associated with a working agricultural landscape and is now surrounded by a modern housing development. Regardless, the property still meets 3 of 9 criteria and therefore meets the designation criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Are there questions for staff? It's always interesting to see what one might uncover. Sometimes they're quite the hidden secrets. And I guess I would say in this case, who would think that there is this log cabin remaining in this fairly older subdivision? All right. Yes, Natalie.
Sorry, I may have missed it in your presentation, but what is the intended use for the property? Going forward, is there any intention to change anything? I know they said they were trying to demolish the property, but yeah, just going forward, what's going to happen?
Through the chair, to my knowledge, the log house is being used as a residential dwelling unit. And I believe that there were some changes to the interior of the building made, but the exterior remains largely intact.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, the recommendation is as follows. That pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 28 Burgetts Avenue as being of cultural heritage value or interest as outlined in Development Services Department Report DSD 2023-412. And who would move this? Thank you, Andrew. All those in favor? It is carried unanimously and will go to Council October 16, 2023. Item 4.6, Lower Dunes Secondary Plan Cultural Heritage Landscape, DSD 2023-395. Would you say this is one of the first that we're experiencing in the city of Kitchener for a cultural heritage landscape, or one of few?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is the first cultural heritage landscape being implemented within the city.
Thank you. And I will say it's been a long time waiting and coming for Lower Dune, and I know that many of the residents who've lived there for a long time are really eager to have this cultural heritage landscape. So, Jessica, would you please give an overview then? And also, we have John Zunick, Senior Planner, in attendance to answer questions from us. If we have questions. So back to Jessica.
Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, the city has been undertaking the Lower Dune Land Use Implementation Project, which aims to update the planning policies and regulations that guide and manage growth within the Lower Dune community. Part of this project has included identifying and determining ways to protect the cultural heritage of this area. As a result, Archaeological Services Incorporated, or ASI, was retained by the city to complete a Lower Dune Cultural Heritage Landscape Study, which is the draft report that's being brought forward to committee today. This study consolidates and builds on the work completed in previous studies for the area, including that done by Stantec in 2019 and Bray Heritage in 2021. The boundary for the CHL is proposed here, and it encompasses Willow Lake Park, some of Homer Watson Park, and a portion of Old Mill Road, Pinnacle Drive, and Amherst Drive. This boundary was determined through the application of criteria set out by the Regional Implementation Guidelines for Cultural Heritage Landscape Conservation, the categories of which look at an area's cultural heritage value or interest, its historical integrity, and its community value. So as mentioned in the previous slide, the report before you today builds on work done in the past few years by other heritage consultants. I've provided a brief overview of what that work is. Stantec was retained to evaluate the area outlined in red to determine its CHL potential using the regional approach. This included examination of individual properties as well as streetscapes and landscapes. While the area in its entirety did not meet criteria, there are 5 separate potential areas noted within the boundaries of the study area. Stantec concluded that 3 of those areas were CHLs, and that includes Homer Watson House, Willow Lake Park, and Dune Valley Golf Course. It found that neither Conestoga College Campus nor the Pinnacle Drive streetscape met the criteria for a CHL. The Bray study agreed with the assessment of Conestoga Campus, but it disagreed with the assessment for the Pinnacle Drive streetscape, finding that the portion of Pinnacle south of Old Mill Road and north of Amherst had design and physical value, and it contained built heritage resources, including 20 and 37 Pinnacle Drive, both of which are Part 4 designated properties. Bray drafted the existing CHL boundary to encompass these areas, determined to be CHLs, including the portion of Pinnacle Drive, which was found to meet heritage criteria. In addition, the Bray study drafted a statement of cultural heritage value or interest and a list of heritage attributes within the recommended boundary. The ASI report reviewed the previous statement of significance and heritage attributes identified by Bray and expanded upon it through further field reviews and historical research. It confirmed that the Lower Dune CHL possessed design and physical, historical associative, and contextual value. A complete list of heritage attributes was also compiled, and it's available in section 4.3 of the ASI report. The attributes relate to the landscape, built form, streetscape, and views, and they together establish a cohesive and continuous area. Some of those attributes are pictured above. The final portion of the ASI study involved the development of objectives, policies, and guidelines applicable to the lands within the CHL boundaries, as well as lands directly adjacent to the boundary. The intent of this part of the work is to secure the long-term protection of the CHL and its heritage attributes by providing a way to manage change within the area. There are 7 general policies proposed, as well as a number of guidelines which speak to specific areas like parkland, the Grand River shoreline, the mill ruins, roads and circulation, interpretation, built form, and the protection of significant views. This work will be implemented by identifying the Lower Dune CHL on Map 9 of the Kitchener Official Plan, and by incorporating the 7 policies into a new section of the official plan that's dedicated to CHL implementation within Kitchener. The city will also be pursuing designation to both Willow Lake Park and 1810 Old Mill Road, which was the lookout point that used to contain the former water station. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. John, are you here? Do you have any words to give us right now, or are you waiting for questions?
Well, just through the chair, I'll just wait for questions.
Thank you. All right, so we'll open this up to questions. No decisions are to be made today, just recommendations and comments about the study itself. So, questions? Yes, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. First, I want to thank staff for this report. It's a good report and it's fair. There's just one thing that came to my attention, actually. The Dune Valley Golf Course was one of the 4 of the 15 recommendations for heritage designation or cultural heritage designation, and I'm curious as to why it was pulled from this, from the original one.
So through you, Madam Chair, there's a few different reasons for that. Per our 2014 Cultural Heritage Landscape Study, it was determined that the Dune Valley Golf Course would qualify as its own separate cultural heritage landscape. It is also an individually listed property, so it warrants merit at looking at its individual significance. It is the Dune Valley Golf Course also expands into Kitchener, so looking at this or any work done on the property would require cooperation with both the City of Cambridge and as well as our sports division. And finally, it's geographically separated from the boundaries from the boundary proposed for the rest of the Lower Dune CHL.
Was it geographically separated when Stantec did this, or did that happen now? Because Stantec included it in the study, so I'm just curious.
So, through you, Madam Chair, Stantec didn't propose the current boundary that's before us. They had looked at the entirety of this area that's outlined in red, and they identified a few distinctive separate areas within that boundary, including the Dune Valley Golf Course.
And who proposed the new boundary then? I'm sorry, I got lost
Bray
somewhere here.
Heritage
Bray
did.
proposed a new boundary, and Bray said that it wasn't part of the...
No, it was not part of the boundary proposed by Bray, which is, their map is a little difficult to make out, but they had looked at the entire area that's outlined in black, and the boundary they proposed is identified with that kind of orange shading in the picture in the lower right-hand corner.
That's hard to see. But you'd said earlier that it is a cultural heritage landscape.
Yes, and
Property.
it meets that criteria on its own.
Okay, so how do we bring that into this? Or how do we, what's the next steps to get this as a declared property then? Like,
So
making sure that it's protected. I'm not feeling that there's enough protection there for this.
So it is currently listed, which means we can look at its significance at its own. We could potentially even pursue designation. We would just need to work with the City of Cambridge as well as our sports division in order to pursue that.
And how long, like an estimated time frame to get that done? What do you think that would take?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we have done an evaluation as part of our Bill 23 implementation work. And as part of that, we had to add a lens of what is the risk of change for a property. The golf course is in public ownership. It's owned by the City of Kitchener. Therefore, we did not raise a prioritization high on this for this particular property, because we do have to review all properties on our registry before the end of next year. So we have a sort of a nimble work plan that we continue to reevaluate next year. So I think that we could probably answer that when we look at our 2024 work plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Michaud, do you have any other comments?
Oh, there was one, and I see that there's been some corrections made with regards to the Willow Lake Park. It's called Willow Lake Park. I know there's been a few documentations in the city's files that it says Willow Park, and it's important from a heritage perspective that it is Willow Lake Park. Just so if we could get that cleared up. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is a very significant piece of information for the residents. The naming of Willow Lake Park, 3 words, came about with a petition from one of the residents in the area, and it was presented to council. And October the 5th, 1998, it was approved by council to have this name. And I just can't help but muse. It's almost 25 years to the date since it got its name, and we still do not have a plaque up to indicate this is a significant park in the city of Kitchener. I do hope that this gets remediated in all the documents that we have in the city. Willow Lake Park. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the public consultation around this secondary plan looked like, because we don't have any of the feedback in this report or in the HIA.
Through the chair, engagement on this phase of work started back in spring of 2022. So a virtual community check-in was held on April 5th of 2022, and a postcard notification was sent out prior to that virtual meeting to all properties within the Lower Dune geography. In the time since, we held a walk shop, so 2 walking workshops earlier this May, so on May 10th, again with the postcard distributed to all properties within Lower Dune about a month prior. Each of those workshops was followed up with a drop-in engagement session at the Dune Valley Golf Course, and all materials were also made available on the Engage WR webpage specific to Lower Dune. So we had the virtual engagement check-in back in April of 2022, the May 2023 workshops and drop-in sessions, as well as the Engage WR project-specific webpage. There were also a number of email blasts sent out to folks on the email list, notifying them of upcoming engagements, as well as when the materials were made public, as well as additional consultation with the Six Nations of the Grand River, Conestoga College, and the Conestoga Students, Inc. Student Association.
And can you give any sort of points that were highlighted during that engagement, that came out of that engagement?
Certainly. Through the chair, there were some questions around how this work related to the previously completed Lower Dune land use study, and it was communicated that a lot of the things that were being brought forward through this body of work were intended to implement the recommendations that were contained within that land use study and approved by council. There were also a number of general questions around the housing concerns associated with the college, concerns brought up by students around difficulty in terms of finding accommodation in close proximity to the college, A lot of questions raised around the preservation of heritage, Willow Lake Park, of the mill ruins, as well as some of the general discussion that was contained within the land use study around sort of making sure that higher density housing forms are located south of Homer Watson Boulevard. So general concerns around student accommodation, preservation of the mill ruins and Willow Lake Park, and really looking to ensure that additional development and densities are situated on the south side of Homer Watson.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I would just like to make a few comments for the record. Perhaps it's the way it's written, but in the consultant's report, it talks about 1916 and Homer Watson Boulevard, the road. And Homer Watson Boulevard did not come about until the late 1960s, 1970. So I think that should be corrected or reworded, consultant. Another error, I would say, or maybe not, Figure 8 is listed as the Dune Mill, and that one is a picture of the Watson Woolen Mill, and which later became the Shoddy Mill, and it is over in the part of Upper Dune, although you don't see any ruins to this day. Another concern of mine is, and I think the report is well done and it's documented about the Indigenous involvement in the area. However, maybe it's folklore, maybe it's folk tales, or how it's been presented in some of the historical records of Dune, but it's talked about the presence of Indigenous, and not necessarily that they worked in the area or resided in the area, so to speak, but there was a presence in the area perhaps for some months or some activities, and I wonder if the consultants would be able to flesh that out. It's always been a question for many of the people in the area. The other question I have, well, I have another question for staff. The mill, this mill that has been itemized in the consultant's report, it has been in, what shall I say, ruins for a year and a half or more, the stone. And so, staff, what is the timeline for getting this repaired? The longer it's left, the less likely we're able to put it together. Is there an answer for that?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have been working on repair and stabilization of the ruins as a separate process from the CHL work. So we have a plan in place, or a plan proposed by our consultants that we've retained to do the work. And we're just working through the draft of that plan right now.
Right, and although today is one of the warmest ever, I am aware that the freezing cold weather is coming, and that isn't exactly the best for mortar and stone. And so we will be aware, will we, of the timing of when this repair is going to happen?
Yes, we'll keep the Heritage Committee informed.
Garrett, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm that the monies required for the repair and restoration of that facility will have to be confirmed through Budget 2024, and we are working with our colleagues in Parks and Operations to secure funding in order to confirm the start date of that work. Before that work starts, we will report back to the committee, so you have awareness on that.
Thank you. And my last question is, There has been a lack of interpretation of this area, Lower Dune. It's one of the oldest in the city. It came in by annexation. And I'm just wondering, what is the timeline? This is excellent information we have here. Cultural heritage landscape. Carl Bray's report was excellent, bringing forth the information on the area and how it can play out. And so what do you anticipate as a timeline to implement this plan or the report that we have before us? It's for staff.
Through the chair, the planning recommendation is slated to go to Committee of Council on October 30th, which would include implementing and embedding the policies that were specific to the Lower Dune CHL within the official plan. So the timeline really is to bring the staff report to Committee of Council at the end of this month, and then council meeting in early November.
Thank you very much. And I do hope then when we present this information to council that it's presented in a positive way. It's not standing in the way of development or growth or density or anything of that nature. What it is to do is to guide it along and to ensure that the very special characteristics of the area remain. And that can come about very nicely if we have all our plans and our outlines in shape. So, and I thank you, staff, for bringing this forward today, October. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, then we will continue on with our agenda item 4.7, which is status update, Bill 23, Municipal Heritage Register Review. And staff, would you have some updates for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our updates include, as of this point, we have now brought forward 10 NOIDs before the committee in 2023. We're anticipating bringing forward 12 to 14 more to the November meeting. The November meeting agenda will look quite heavy, but I would like to remind Heritage Committee that 12 of these properties we're anticipating bringing forward have already been reviewed as part of the Municipal Heritage Register work, and staff, or the Heritage Committee, did recommend pursuing designation. So that's the completion of that work. That included contacting 12 property owners for designation, and we received 2 responses back, both which were indicating support. And finally, I'd like to remind Heritage Committee that the November meeting is the last one of 2023.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate this update, just to know where we are, how many properties and property owners have been approached and what the feedback is. Any questions for staff? Ilona?
So for those property owners that have not yet responded, is there a follow-up planned, or do we just wait?
Through you, Madam Chair, once we bring the notices of intention to designate forward, they would be alerted again, as is the normal procedure when a NOID is brought forward. An ad will be posted in the paper, and one will also be sent to the property owners again, which would make it the 4th correspondence or 4th attempt that we have, or sorry, 3rd attempt of contact to property owners.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Staff, do you have any further comments for us?
If you give me the opportunity, I will take it. No, I just wanted to acknowledge, and I think if you see the slide in front of you, if you look at the tremendous body of work, I would be remiss if I did not say that would not be possible without the work that the committee has done. With your assistance in doing field assessments and participating in some of that work, it has allowed us to maintain that aggressive work plan that we presented back to you in January that we all thought was going to be almost unapproachable, and we are largely on target for that, and we have designated and have approved more NOIDs than we ever have done. So I think that the committee should be rest assured that your work is, you're seeing the fruits of your labor and your work, and I think we have a really good positive response to some pretty tremendous tight pressures that have been applied from the province, and we'll continue to prioritize this work into 2024. So we are appreciative. I know the team has also been working very hard, and it's exciting to be able to look back towards the end of the year and look at what we've accomplished together. So everyone should be quite proud of what's been achieved.
Thank you, Garrett. We appreciate your remarks, and we'd like to also thank you and staff for working hard and digging into all the research that has to be done. It's quite the load. However, we shall overcome. Any other questions, comments? I'd just like to highlight the fact, and I've had this discussion with Jessica already, about perhaps she'll see a very long agenda next time because of all the properties that need to be proposed, intention to designate. However, we have reviewed them, so things should move along very smoothly. So all the best and happy Thanksgiving. And is there anyone who would like to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Michaud, thank you.